If you worry about having ADHD, don't despair. You scientists now believe Leonardo da Vinci had it too. Leonardo da Vinci produced some of the world's most iconic art, but historical accounts show that he struggled to complete his works. 500 years after his death, researchers from King's College London suggest the best explanation for Leonardo's inability to finish projects is that the great artist may have had attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder (ADHD). In an article that was published this week, Professor Marco Catani lays out the evidence supporting his hypothesis, drawing on historical accounts of Leonardo's work practices and behavior. ADHD is a behavioral disorder characterized by continuous procrastination, the inability to complete tasks, mind-wandering, and a restlessness of the body and mind. While most common, as well as explaining his chronic procrastination, ADHD could have been a factor in Leonardo's extraordinary creativity and achievements across the arts and sciences. While impossible to make a post-mortem diagnosis for someone who lived 500 years ago, I am confident that ADHD is the most convincing and scientifically plausible hypothesis to explain Leonardo's difficulty in finishing his works, said Professor Catani, who is from the college's Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology, and Neuroscience. Historical records show Leonardo spent excessive time planning projects, but lacked perseverance, he added. ADHD could. Leonardo's difficulties with sticking to tasks were pervasive from childhood. Accounts from alongside reports of erratic behavior and incomplete projects from fellow artists and patrons, including Pope Leon X, there is indirect evidence to suggest that Leonardo's brain was organized differently compared to the average person. He was left-handed. Perhaps the most distinctive and yet disruptive side of Leonardo's mind was his voracious curiosity, which both propelled his creativity and also distracted him. Professor Catani, who specializes in treating neurodevelopmental conditions like autism and ADHD, says there is a prevailing misconception that ADHD is typical of misbehaving children with low intelligence, destined for a troubled life. On the contrary, most of the adults I see in my clinic report having been bright, intuitive children, but develop symptoms of anxiety and depression later in life for having failed to achieve their potential. It is incredible that Leonardo considered himself as someone who had failed in life. I hope that the case reprinted from. Be sure and share the inspiring news with your friends on social media. Want a morning jolt of good news? You must be to post a comment.
Raindrop, drop top, top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park,